My name is Alex Richardson. I'm a neighbor around here. I live in the Powderhorn neighborhood, and I have since the day I was born 25 years ago. And so what happened today was the East Sanctuary encampment here at Powderhorn Park was served notice on Friday that they had 72 hours to vacate. It was the same notice that they were served about a month ago over on the west side. And at that time on the west side, the neighbors they stood up and they said, no, we're not going to allow the park police to come and evict these people that are seeking sanctuary. And this time they, and so the events of the last month have unfolded as the park sanctuary movement has grown, things have evolved quickly. But what happened here today was the notice that was served was followed through on by the county, the city, the park board, park police, and then all the third-party companies that were assisting with facilities. There have been concerted efforts to get people out since notice has been served and get them to other safe locations, whether it be other parks, hotels, shelters, or wherever else they might have the wherewithal to go. And so thankfully the numbers here were more limited than they could have been when it came to forcible removal. Some people today did go willingly to other sanctuaries, and there were those who chose to stay. And those people were forcibly removed. The police dragged them out by hands and feet. The tents were picked up and hauled away by bulldozers and front loaders. And the belongings of a number of residents were taken, and as far as I know, not returned or destroyed or thrown away. And so we understand that everybody in the situation, everybody involved, does not have the answer. But I don't think that this was the answer. I don't think anybody believes this was the answer, and I think that both can exist at the same time. I think that we can, be at a loss for how to really tackle this right now, but we can also be moving in the right direction, both with, our mitigations of danger right now and also our planning going forward. And so right now we feel like the volunteers, the residents of the sanctuaries, the neighbors involved, anybody who's, given any effort to this, who isn't involved in any sort of governmental structure, they're really giving their all. Whether it be people committing to helping make these spaces safe, people committing to providing supplies, people committing to finding them resources. All of those people have been doing their utmost, and as far as we can tell, government has been doing the absolute minimum, if not nothing at all. Not to say that the park board hasn't been instrumental in helping us with some things, but we realize that is, ultimately this doesn't fall to them. It should never have been up to the park board to try and mitigate the harm coming to people who have been displaced. This is something that, falls on the shoulders of the city, of the county, of the state of Minnesota. And frankly, those leaders have been nowhere to be found. And it's pretty disgusting to see that they would allow this to happen for a month, and then have this be their only response to forcibly evict people. We knew that the situation was dangerous here, and we never wanted it to be any sort of solution. And right now, it's being treated, as the only thing that was possible for the last month, and now the forcible eviction is the only solution to an unsafe situation, is to put people into more unsafe situations and further traumatize them and further displace them. And so, we've been doing all that we can, and the government, who actually does have the resources and the ability and the responsibility, they've really, 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 really fallen short, and that is the understatement of the year.
All right, thank you for that synopsis. You talked about the community sort of coming together here, what I saw as well. Can you talk about the different facets? So we had it was like an autonomous city that developed outside in a park sanctuary, right? And so, Can you talk about just the different facets? Was there a kitchen? Was there a medical aid? Like, how did all that? And I know there's security. How did all those different facets get along, and how was it organized?
So when the encampment originally arrived, the sanctuary encampment originally arrived on the west side. They came over with some volunteers who had been involved in the sanctuary occupancy of the Sheraton Hotel on Lake Street after they had been displaced from another area down East Lake Street following the riots that were following the murder of George Floyd. And so there had been volunteers that had been working with them through a few steps leading up to their arrival on Powderhorn. So they had learned some things. They had kind of realized, okay, what are the supplies that we need on the ground? What are the things that, people are, people in the situation that they're in right now are going to need from us as volunteers. Like, what can we give, basically? And so there were medic tents, there were supply drop-off tents, there were food storage tents, there were dry storage tents. We did our utmost to get facilities places as soon as we could, and so that was kind of how the infrastructure grew. It was through volunteer efforts and through outreach to the community to try and get as many people involved as possible, to get shifts covered for manning the food tent, manning the medic tent, being able to facilitate and organize supplies. The residents themselves of the sanctuary, of the parks, they were instrumental in all of that as well, in terms of communicating their needs, but also, helping hand in hand with the volunteers themselves. And so, and same goes for security, that obviously we knew that there were dangerous situations that could present themselves towards vulnerable communities that have been displaced a number of times, and so everybody did their utmost to try and create a safe location. But the reality is, a problem of this magnitude, a population of this size, it can't be managed or facilitated in any way by a bunch of volunteers, a bunch of people who live around the park. And so everybody did their absolute best, and everybody worked around the clock, sometimes literally around the clock. Either whether it was, sitting in front of a computer and doing advocacy and sending emails, or it was manning the medic tent and, providing care for people that needed it, people who needed it the most. And yeah, so everybody really did what they could, and everybody gave it their all, and the government did nothing until they felt like, it was something that they didn't want to see anymore, and then they got rid of it.
Real quick, what is a viable solution that you think could be had? Obviously, the government has the resources and the abilities. Do you think what are some steps that the government could take locally, or because I know they tried, right? Like Angela County pushed the commission to the county to try to get people into hotels, but it wasn't everybody. It was like a select few, and so they've tried to do these little maneuvers, but it obviously has not impacted the full amount of houseless folks that there are, and so. You having worked with this situation for however long you have in these last only a month or so, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so
just last few weeks.
Yeah. And so, but just being immersed in this, what is your ideas of maybe the pathway forward?
Unfortunately, it's going to take a coordinated effort from government on a number of levels. I think that the ideas are all there, whether it's mid-term or medium-term to long-term housing solutions, like tiny houses, like investing in the refurbishing of existing buildings. I mean, there are the downtown office buildings are maybe pre-COVID at 50% capacity, and now damn near empty. And so, thinking about getting creative about those kind of solutions, and people say that a lot, getting creative, but it's, it really doesn't take a lot of creativity. You basically just have to assess the landscape, see the resources that you have, whether it's existing structures, whether it's, city planners, whether it's, incentivizing and subsidizing construction companies and architectural firms and things like that, to come up with plans. You're telling me that, our government, full of lawyers, people with PhDs, people with doctorates, they can't come up with some way, to house 10,000 more people. I mean, this is a city of, 600,000 people. 10,000 people can't find residence anywhere, with all the resources that the government has, I think is pretty ridiculous. So there's that. I mean, and then there's also, the considerations that, not everybody is in a stable place in their life, that in such a stable place in their life that they can, exist in traditional housing. And so, when you talk about treatment, the models are out there. I was just having a conversation before we linked up, to someone who was referencing like the harm reduction that goes on in the Netherlands. The way that they provide free drugs to people, they provide safe spaces, they provide as many resources as they need to stay safe, while also making all the resources available that are needed for people to overcome the things that they're struggling with if they're ready and they're able. The idea that well, either you come all the way to us and figure yourself out, and then you'll get some small peanuts as far as resources is ridiculous. And to think that could be effective at all is just ludicrous. And so I personally, and I know that this is this is a radical idea, but I think that, the way that we have gun buyback programs when, gun laws change throughout the world or in our country, I think that a similar approach needs to be taken for drugs. I think that drugs need to be decriminalized and they need to be bought back, because the reality is dealing drugs is a crime of necessity. Nobody's dealing drugs because they want to be or because they think it's fun. It's extremely dangerous. Not to pretend like I understand all the problems of the communities that I'm speaking about right now, but the reality is, like, if we're gonna find a solution for this, nobody can be left out of the picture. And so the idea of buying drugs back from drug dealers, and maybe that giving them the opportunities and the resources in that way to reinvest in their communities, to start businesses of their own, to do whatever they will, to go back to school, to offer job training, things like that. Letting those things go hand in hand, treatment, job training, and housing. Getting culturally appropriate solutions. I mean, the ideas are out there. It's not that hard. But the reality is the volunteers can't go out and build that shit. The government has to invest in it, and they have to be the ones that do it. Period.